Welcome to Carlin The Morning with me, Carlin Coin, in the morning. So today, September 15th, there was a terrorist attack in London. The subway over there, or the tube as they call it, had some sort of homemade bomb go off. A couple dozen people injured or killed, although I heard a lot of that was a result of the stampeding, trying to get away from the blast zone. So, nothing too exceptional about the terrorist attack itself. Homemade bomb. We don't know all the details. We don't know exactly who directed this, who this guy was affiliated with, blah, blah, blah. But what we have been seeing is people react to it. For example, Trump put out some tweets, ramping up his call for a travel ban. And the one tweet, though, that's getting a lot of reaction, here, I'll read it word for word. Loser terrorists must be dealt with in a much tougher manner. The internet is their main recruitment tool, which we must cut off and use better. So, what does that mean? How do we interpret that? Well, one, he's doing the loser terrorist thing. He's going back to that label, which I think is a good, branding thing. We don't want to depict them as these evil, scary monsters. They're just some dumb losers. I think that's one of the improvements Trump has made on the way we approach these terrorist guys. I'm happy to see that he's sticking with that. But the part of this tweet that's drawing ire is people are claiming that Trump wants to just get rid of the internet. Wants to, criminalize the internet or, have the CIA cut the tubes. Yeah, and so, one more time, I'm going to read that second sentence. The internet is their main recruitment tool, which we must cut off and use better. So, if we're going to be using the internet better, that sounds to me like we're still going to have an internet. Now, when he says we must cut off, the internet is their main recruitment tool, which we must cut off. That does kind of sound like he's talking about cutting off the internet. I think that's just sloppy language, though. He's talking about cutting off the internet application as their main recruitment tool, because he wants to use the internet better. So it seems like a far-fetched, pretty fanciful interpretation. And I didn't see this in many credible news sites. You even go to Huffington Post and Google News and, all the different far-left places. I didn't see any of them running with this story that Trump's plan is to eliminate the internet. But it was the top story on Reddit today. Our politics, which is just it's, something like Huffington Post is just like an advocacy organization for the left, but it's controlled top down. Something like Our Politics, there is some top down controls going on there, but just the mechanics, the fundamental mechanics, are about, your average far left people just getting in there, submitting titles, and then upvoting based on headlines that they enjoy. So, it has a more chaotic, less well put together, less well edited take than your standard salon.coms or what have you. So, I thought it was funny that they're running with this story. Oh my god, Trump's going to turn off the internet now! Yeah, and I'm just looking over this comment again and again. I don't think there's any fair interpretation there. It's just, hysteria. Alright, what else has been going on with this terrorist attack? He is talking about ramping up the travel ban, claiming that we need a much tougher and more specific travel ban. That more specific thing sort of hit my ears as saying Muslim. So I don't know if that's exactly true. But he is getting some pushback from that. Politically, it makes total sense. I don't know. The travel ban thing, it's always been a temporary thing. Right, and I think it made total sense to do 6 months or a year or something where you restrict immigration from some of these places that we have very little control or very little vetting going on. Like if someone's immigrating from England, we can contact the English government and be like, all right, what's this guy's record? What crimes has he done? Blah, blah, blah. But if someone's immigrating from Somalia, there's no DMV in Somalia. There's no reliable central bureaucratic justice process that we can use to track down their history. So how do they do this? With just interviewing family members and stuff? And they're like, no, he's a good guy. He's a good guy. So that whole process, I've heard some experts talk about the process of vetting immigrants from these unvettable countries, and they basically don't vet them. So it made total sense to me that we put a temporary ban on those while we try to figure out some better procedures. And I don't know, just from humanitarian purposes and, PR, America as the shining light on the hill, for those propagandistic purposes, I think we're not going to be able to permanently ban immigration, even from places where there's no credible way to assess the threat. But, so, at the end of the day, we might have to go back to something similar to what was there before the travel ban, but hopefully not. Hopefully they are able to get some better tools in place. I don't know exactly what that would look like. But just the notion of taking a pause to try to address that stuff was eminently reasonable. And then, there's sort of a partial travel ban that eventually took effect, blah, blah, blah. So it's a little weird that Trump is pushing for an expanded travel ban because, again, I see why he does it politically. Travel ban is his thing. It's one of his rhetorical arguments about why he's good on terrorism, and there's a terrorism thing. He's like, see, you should be doing my thing. So it makes sense rhetorically, but I think, how long do we want this travel ban to be in place? How much more powerful does it need to be? I don't know. I feel like the travel ban's hopefully going to stop being an issue within the next 6 months to a year from now. But we shall see on that. And we'll get more on this terrorist attack as the news comes in. Meanwhile, Floyd Mayweather is fully in favor of Trump's pussy-grabbing comments. I know he's a little late to the party. We don't hear as much about that locker room talk as we did during the campaign trail. But he described it as just that. That's just locker room talk. He's talking about he's just a man. That's how men talk. You see some girl with a fat ass, you're like, hey, that girl's got fat ass. I grabbed that fat ass. And he's just yeah, pussy grabbing. Yeah, I'm just the man. Going around grabbing some fucking pussies. And that's even a little more... Because, the way I read the pussy grabbing comments, he said I could grab them by the pussy. They'd let me do whatever they want. I'm the man. I'm famous. Mayweather... It was a little ambiguous, but the wording seemed to suggest that he might have been saying Trump did grab them by the pussy, and which he approves of that. So, I don't know. I think that's a little bit harder to justify unless there's some op where it's just women groupie type situation, where these women, they're like, oh my god, have sex with me, Donald Trump. And he's just walking through the room grabbing them by the pussy. Something like that I wouldn't have ethical concerns with. But most scenarios of grabbing a woman by the pussy seem more unethical than that. But again, I don't think that's what the Hollywood Access comments were about. But it appears Mayweather does, and he's fine with that. So hey, good on Mayweather, I guess. Yeah, whatever. I don't really care. Mayweather has always had ethical issues, with like woman beating and stuff. So he's not a paragon of virtue. But it was fun to see him weighing in on this topic. Alright. A little less fun story from the combat sports world is Mark Hunt. Veteran fighter, did K1 kickboxing, then he was in Pride at a high level, and he's now been competing at UFC against some of the best guys in the world. He's come out and saying that he's noticing some symptoms of the brain damage taking a toll on him. Slurred speech, trouble remembering stuff, and that's sad to hear. We know it's going to happen to some degree at some point, and God knows Mark Hunt has taken some blows. He has a legendary chin, and he's willing to he's like a strong guy, but he's never like a tall guy. He sort of has like a squatty, fat phenotype. So he's always seems like the smaller guy, and he's just getting in there and not afraid to get in the pocket, take blows, and then just throw huge, powerful shots. But he's certainly been taking some blows, and now he's come public with the fact that it's affecting him. That's sad. Yeah, it's just distressing. It's another realization, we all knew it was there on some level, but it's just a reminder of that grim reality. But the interesting twist with Mark Hunt's case is that he's been very anti-steroid use, calling these guys cheaters. He even has filed a lawsuit against Brock Lesnar. For the last time they had a fight, Lesnar popped positive for some kind of steroids or some performance-enhancing drugs. So he's saying that all of this brain damage, he understands it comes with the territory in being a fighter, but he does not agree to fight people who are cheating, who are using tactics in violation of the rules to enhance the amount of damage they can do to his brain. So he has an active lawsuit going over that. I've heard some people describe this as assault, or like if someone died and then you popped positive for steroids, you could be charged with murder. I've heard some people describe it that way, where the fighters consent to get in there and punch each other, but they do not consent to fight someone who's illegally juiced up on steroids. So you're punching this guy without consent. And it's an interesting topic. I don't know if that's ever going to take hold, because, it's still like you consented to 90% of it. You didn't consent to this exact scenario, but, what if the guy is using some other dirty tactics, like the John Jones eye poke type thing? That's in violation of the rules? And then if you get a warning, is it okay? But if you get a yellow card, now it's assault? It's a really... There's not clear boundaries on which to base this. So I think it's unlikely that's ever going to be held up to an assault type of thing. But these lawsuits might be successful. Being able to sue someone for damages, like civil action. At least for lost career earnings, and maybe even for the brain damage and emotional trauma, all that crap. Alright, let's move on. So, Chelsea Manning had been offered a visiting fellowship at Harvard, and there was a lot of uproar about that, and now it has been revoked. So, I don't think Chelsea Manning should be barred from places because, transsexual nature or whatever, and I sincerely doubt that's why Harvard made the decision. What I don't get is how this offer was made in the first place. What does Chelsea Manning have to teach these Harvard students at, Kennedy School of Politics? Chelsea Manning was not. You could argue that the motivation behind the original leaks were noble or well-intentioned, but they weren't executed well. They were sloppy. They did expose a bunch of legitimate, methods and sources, and they did put Americans' lives at risk. Something like Edward Snowden dump was a lot more responsible, where the Chelsea Manning put out way more information than was necessary to make the point. Only like 5% of what she released was newsworthy, and then like 20% of it was damaging to our military interest. So I never thought it was done in a smart or well thought out way. So the fact that she's being offered this job as like a Harvard visiting fellow, it just reeked of political correctness in the first place. It was just doing it to score PR points, because I honestly don't think she's an intellectual heavyweight. And the fact that it now got pulled, although the reason this fellowship got pulled, I doubt it was because she lacked the intellectual, gravitas. I think it was, again, because of a PR move. So that's kind of a shitty reason to revoke it. But again, it was kind of shitty that she was offered the job in the first place. So I'm happy with where that one ended up. And don't really care one way or the other. But I feel like people are focusing on the wrong issues. Alright, final story today. ESPN, there was a report out today that a couple days ago, ESPN tried to pull that alt-left reporter off of a broadcast, the one who had tweeted out that Trump is a white supremacist, and that they actually tried to pull her off of a broadcast, but then the co-host, who's also a black guy, he refused to do the show without her. And so they were in the position where they would have had to pull 2 black hosts and replace them with 2 white hosts. And they just deemed that would be too damaging to their brand. That would be viewed as too racist. So they just let her go on the air uninterrupted, like normal. I mean, so this is it's another one of those gray area stories. Like, yes, obviously she has the freedom of speech right to tweet out that she thinks Trump is a white supremacist, and ESPN, as a private company, has the right to fire her for presenting their, just because they don't want their brand to be associated with certain types of political talk. And she did get a warning for this or whatever, but she's still sticking around. Big friggin' deal, man. Some people are saying it's comparable to the Kurt Schilling thing, where he got fired from ESPN for saying some political stuff in his spare time off the air. Who knows? Maybe they are more willing to come down hard against the right than they are against the left. It kind of has that feel, but there's no direct evidence to point to there. So it does feel, the one point where it does feel really different though was the stuff Kurt Schilling said was was clearly partisan, but I don't think any of it raised to the level of Trump is a white supremacist. That is a really extreme statement. It's kind of feels like it's not that big of a deal in today's environment, because that's kind of what CNN's been telling us for months now. But it's a huge accusation, and 2, it's supported by next to nothing at all. The evidence they'd look for in this was the fact that after he disavowed David Duke 8 times, that one time he's like, wait, who's David Duke? And then later that day he disavowed him again. That's one of the main pieces of evidence they'd use to prove that Trump is a white supremacist. Or that in the wake of the Charlottesville thing, after denouncing bigotry, he mentioned that there was violence on both sides. which is, you can see it in the videos. It's demonstrably true. So, it's a huge accusation, and it's one with little support, but it's one that feels not too far out of bounds right now, because our radicalization meter has just gone haywire. People are so out of their minds right now. But hey, I think we've been in this crazy partisan thing since the election. Like, even before the election, it was crazy partisan, but then November 8th just changed everything. Like, the Hillary people went insane. Like, the Trump derangement syndrome, it can be seen as like a form of PTSD, like a traumatic event that had neurological effects on their brains. And like, you see some insane partisanship after the election. So it's not too surprising that we are here, but I think we're starting to pull back. I think we're starting to come out of that fog. We're starting to get back to a bit more rational, a bit less tribalist take on politics, and I hope we stay this way without any major changes, without 9/11/2 happening or something. I think a year from now, we're going to be on significantly less partisan footing than we stand now. So, here's to that, guys. Let's hope for the best.